been showing you how I make cosplay in this channel for several years now, and I realized that probably you know very little about me and about how I became a cosplayer. The thing is that this month is my 15th year anniversary making cosplays. Yes, I've been making cosplay for 15 years now, so I thought this would be a great time to just tell you my story, how I ended up here, and how I've managed to make almost 200 cosplays in the last 15 years. Welcome to Cosplayland! I am Alice, just that is not really my name. Everybody does call me Alice, but my name is Alicia. I was born in Spain, and right now I live in England, and cosplay is my full-time job. I thought I would just make a summary of what has happened through these 15 years and how something that started as a silly hobby with some friends became my full-time job, and why I make cosplays and show you every other week here in this channel. I was a very creative child. I've always liked drawing and I've always liked doing crafts, and I've had a family that also loved crafting and sewing. My mom was an amazing embroiderer and my aunt was a professional sewist, and also my dad used to do lots of crafts and he could make the most incredible things out of thin air. So I've always lived in an environment in which everybody was super creative, including my sister and my brothers. So yeah, since I was very little, I've liked crafting and I've liked doing things, and I also really liked reading and drawing and just making all kinds of crafts myself. When I was in high school, my friend Honjun introduced me to manga and Japanese culture and all those drawings and reading, so it was just amazing. Two of the things that I loved the most, which was reading and drawing together and combined in little books, it was just awesome. It was so awesome. At the time I used to photocopy her books because I didn't have money to buy my own mangas and stuff, so she would just lend me hers, and I liked it so much that I used to go and copy the pages I liked the most and draw them because I just found them amazing. At the time, conventions weren't a thing and cosplay was definitely not a thing, and even if I carried on watching anime and manga, I kind of moved on and just moved on with my studies. I studied to be an English teacher and I went to uni. I just studied in Ireland for a year, and basically I just carried on with my life. I knew that conventions existed, but they were pretty far away and there were only little gatherings in my city, maybe 100, 200 people gatherings in which you will have one day of event with people singing karaoke here and there, or maybe just a few booths scattered around. Nothing big, just very, very local, very small. And that's when I first saw my first cosplayer. I am from a little city called Murcia in the south of Spain. It's lovely, has very nice beaches, and it is very, very sunny. I grew up dressing up in what you could call folkloric reenactment. I was in a dancing group and we did dress up with the folkloric clothes of my city. And no, it's not flamenco. It was something completely different. There's more to Spain than just flamenco. All these dresses were handmade by my mom and my aunt, and it was pretty much an inspiration for me. Moving on to 2009, my city announced that they were going to be making a very big manga and anime convention. I had started going out with this cute boy that I had met in England, and he was visiting over, and we decided that why not go and check it out, because he also liked his Ghibli films and stuff, and I was still very much into anime and manga and even video games at the time. you can say I'm kind of a late bloomer for most things, and one of them was Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII had already been out for a while, but I had just got my first console and I literally was obsessed with Final Fantasy, and in particular with Tifa. She was my favorite character. She was strong, she was a warrior, she could just like punch anyone that was on her way, and I decided that it would be a fun idea to just dress up as this character from this video game that I loved, and she became my first ever cosplay. I was very proud of this cosplay, and I think I'm still very proud of this cosplay. And of course, at the time, even if everyone around me was very crafty, I had no idea about sewing. I knew a little bit of hand sewing, and that was it. So the best way to go for me, I decided, was to just like put some things together from my wardrobe and just do little hand stitches here and there to make her look like the character in my video game. I was not wearing a wig, I was not wearing contacts, definitely was missing lots of parts on the cosplay, but hey, I loved it and a lot of people recognized me and it was so much fun. I just loved it. This first year, I didn't make one cosplay, I actually made 2 cosplays, and the next day I decided to go as Misa Misa, which was a character from Death Note, which was very popular at the time and I had just read. I didn't even have the books, I was reading the books online because I didn't have any money, so once again, just using things for my wardrobe and just like hoping for the best, just trying to resemble this character I really, really liked. And you know what? I absolutely loved it. I couldn't wait for the next year, for the next convention, and for the next cosplay to make. The next year was 2010, and by then I had a group of friends that also liked anime and manga and video games, and I just convinced them that we should definitely dress up and go and just wear a cosplay to this event because it was fun and we definitely needed to just like wear something for the event. We decided on Tekken characters because it was a game we were playing at the time, and when we had some free time we were always playing it, and I personally had started making my character just a few months in advance, but my friends didn't really start with time enough, and I literally remember going to my friend's house to try and help her, and I saw her just grabbing a piece of fabric and literally just cutting on the fabric and just like putting it on her and going like, oh, it doesn't fit. I believe we can't go as Tekken characters anymore. These things happen. And I was a little bit disappointed because I had my Alisa Boskonovich almost ready, but my friends had not really started with enough time, and I felt a little bit bad wearing that cosplay that year, so we just decided to improvise and we went as Persocons, which is just like a very random generic character from Chobits, which is my favorite anime. And yeah, this was a little bit of the year I realized that making cosplay was more than just trying to make something the week just before. And even if I had a lot of fun going to the convention this year as well, I definitely started rethinking my strategy because after all, I had a full year to prepare my cosplays for the next event, and I wanted to make sure that I would have enough time to finish the things that I had started and just go and dress as my favorite characters. So yeah, the second year was a little bit disappointing. By the way, this was also the first time ever I wore a wig and that I had bought a wig, and I didn't even know that there was a difference between having a party dress wig and having what at the time was like a Kanekalon wig, which is like those heat-resistant fibers that look like the real thing that you see in all of my videos. And the wig that I had was like so terrible, like it was the worst thing ever. It was overpriced, it was ugly. Let's just forget about that one. It's never existed. That's fine. In 2011, everything was under control because, after all, I had more than a year to finish my Lisa cosplay. I was hoping I would just go with my friends dressed with Tekken with me, but it was very clear very early on that I was the one that liked making cosplays, and my friends kind of like decided that it was just way too difficult for them. Alisa was also my first attempt ever at sewing. And funny story is that I used to go with my mom to the fabric store every other week to make our folkloric dresses, and it never crossed my mind that they also sell other fabrics in that place, and I could have bought fabric for Alisa. I was also broke, so I just decided to just grab some random fabrics from oversized t-shirts that I got for very cheap on the market, and yeah, it didn't even cross my mind that I could use fabric. I don't know why. The year before, I had literally just bought a bunch of things that resembled the colors of Alisa and that I could modify, but keep in mind this was a very complicated costume and there were a lot of things that I had to modify. I actually didn't have a sewing machine just yet because the ones in my house were broken. They were very, very, very old machines, like literally my mom's machine. You had to just use the pedal to use it. And they were so old and so difficult to use that I just didn't want to use them. And I decided to just hand sew everything. So my Alisa cosplay, which is the first one that had significant alterations, was completely hand sewn, and I had to just figure out how to make the parts for it, how to make the sleeves for it. I kind of just cut pieces and just put them together. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a lot of fun. I did things with clay. I went to the multi-price store and got little bits and pieces to put and decorate, and I was so proud of that cosplay. I was doing everything in my bedroom, just doing my very best. Had no idea what I was doing, but I definitely had a lot of fun doing it. 2011 was also the year of Vocaloid, so yes, like everybody else, I made a Vocaloid cosplay, but I've never made a Miku cosplay. I've always been a Luca person, so I made the magnet version with the butterfly ears, and my friend actually did go with me as Luca. The manga convention in my city was 3 days, and I didn't manage to do a cosplay for every single day because I think by this time I was just obsessed, and my free time while I was still studying in uni was just making little pieces for the next cosplay for the next year. In 2012, I decided to go big or go home. I had entered the competition the year before. I had seen the level of other cosplayers, what they were making and what kind of things I could improve, and I decided to make my biggest cosplay to that date, and this was Ignis from Jingai Makyo. The thing is that I just was in love with the character. I hadn't really played the game, but I knew the story, and again, there's something about strong women just that I really like. I love the design. I was always a little bit of a goth myself, so just wearing this black and white dress, I just loved it. This was also the first time ever that I made my own patterns. Everything was drafted from scratch. And I think I probably used pieces from other things that I had at home and tried to just get the patterns from jackets and t-shirts that I had just to make sure they looked more or less like that character. I designed all the butterflies of the skirt on Photoshop because I didn't know how to use Photoshop. My brother had it before because of his job, and it was something that I liked playing with every so often. So I made all the pieces, everything, absolutely everything was handmade. I had a good wig, I even styled the wig, I learned how to style the wig, and it took me months to make this cosplay. I did enter the competition and I was super happy because I actually managed to place, and it was the first time that I won a competition. It was just a second prize, but it was great. Someone was telling me that what I was doing it was cool and that they liked it. Actually, Ignis wasn't my first drafted pattern because earlier that year I had drafted this Eldar Farseer character from Warhammer 40,000 because, again, I really liked playing Dawn of War. I had actually been a Warhammer painter since before I even started cosplay. It may be a shock, but yeah, I had been painting Warhammer for quite a while. I was never super quick at painting, and I definitely had years in which I did not paint, but Warhammer was something that I really liked, and my boyfriend in particular is a big Warhammer fan, and while I was visiting him in England, there was a Warhammer convention. I think it was probably a game fest. I decided to make a cosplay of Eldar Farseer Idronel from Dawn of War, which was a game that I was playing at the time. I've always loved Eldar, they are my favorite army, and I decided it would be fun to wear this cosplay at a game fest. I remember just cutting this old jacket that was very worn off to try and make some pieces, and I believe this was really the first time I attempted to do a pattern by myself. I had no idea what I was doing. It definitely was completely wrong from the point of view of pattern making, but it was like my first attempt of doing something which was completely mine, because I was not going to find patterns for this character anywhere. So it was great, and it was also amazing because a lot of people stopped me at the convention and told me how much they loved the character, they loved the cosplay. It was very uncommon to see people at Game Fest with cosplays at the time, and I think I was one of the few that had actually made anything that big and brought to the convention. Come here, my love. Oh, you big cat. Wanna join us? You're not in the story just yet. Not yet. Okay, you can stay there. These two characters, my Eldar Farseer and Ignis, were the two characters that definitely were the keystones that just made me realize I really like this hobby. And in particular, when I won the second prize with my Eldar Farseer, I started talking with people that were involved with the conventions I was going to, and somehow they asked me to make a panel at the next convention that was going to be happening, and I somehow ended up in an anime and manga association somehow out of nowhere, which was one of the most exciting things probably that happened to me. 2013 was the year in which I clicked with my best friends ever. I was invited to do a talk about cosplay, and here is where I met my best friend Larsen. I have made so many cosplays with her, but not only that, I met a bunch of people who, like me, were passionate about anime, manga, comics, video game, cosplay, and it was great. The talk I did about cosplay went so well that they invited me to join their association, and basically now I was going to a bunch of different conventions that I didn't even know they existed. They literally told me one night, hey, there is a convention tomorrow in this other city and we are just going. If you want to just join, just jump in the car and we will go to this other convention. I literally didn't know these people, but it was like, that's the best idea ever. And we became friends and it was just the most amazing time ever for me. It was just incredible. We visited every city, going to convention, just dressing up in every single one of them. I just loved it. This year, 2013, was also the year in which I went to my first big convention. Up until now, I was just going to the local ones. They were not very big. And we decided to go to the one in Barcelona, which is like the oldest and most renowned convention in Spain. It was the first time I was seeing all these guests and literally hundreds and hundreds of people wearing cosplays. Here is also where they do the selections to go to places like World Cosplay Summit or Euro Cosplay or the cosplay gathering in France. So it was just amazing just seeing the level at which everybody was making cosplay. I was still a beginner. Yes, I was able to sew things together that looked like cosplays, but I realized there was so much more, and there were people that literally spent the whole year creating these amazing cosplays. It was just like mind-blowing for me, the amount of events, the amount of people making cosplays. I would consider this year like the best one in which I actually made group cosplays. My older group of friends liked anime and liked the geeky scene, but they were not so much into cosplays, and whenever we had done something together, it had been more kind of like the kind of thing you will put together for a Halloween party just the night before, that kind of thing. This other group of people, however, were so into it. They were definitely my vibe and they were definitely thinking what I was thinking. We would literally spend hours every week talking about what was the next thing, the next big thing we were going to do, how we were going to enter this competition and that competition, and just go everywhere in the country, just visiting all the conventions in the world. In Barcelona, I dressed as Asuna, with my friend also dressed as Asuna from a different world, and it was great. Previously, I had been doing 1, 2, maybe 3 cosplays a year. This year I made 17 cosplays and I visited so many conventions. It was just amazing. 2014 was even bigger. Not only I was in this association with like-minded people, I somehow became the president of the association. The queen of the geeks. I was not entering the competitions anymore because I was organizing the competitions. I was literally the one behind the stage, just helping people to get on stage and helping people to just make sure their skits were all together and the USBs were working and they could do whatever. In Spain they do a lot of props and a lot of stage. So I was like helping all the cosplayers to get by, giving advice, giving more panels on how to make cosplays here and there. And I was at the same time going to all the competitions or going to all the conventions all over Spain, just visiting the different cities, wearing a different cosplay each time. It was awesome. It was literally every time my friends told me there was a competition, it would be like, hey, there is a convention in this city in 2 weeks. Do you want to go? Yeah. Do you want to also enter the competition? Yeah. Do you have anything to wear? No, let's make something. And we would literally make cosplay in 1 week, go to the event, go to the competition, had fun, and just spend a weekend with my friends. I was also being invited to go to places as a guest, and I was just literally just doing all kinds of crazy cosplays. I was not entering the competitions in my city, but I was definitely entering competitions outside my city because, it was fun and we got to talk with our friends because the cosplay community is so friendly. You just made friends with absolutely everybody. This year, I made super big cosplays like my Asterocious run or my Kindred Vampire. I remember winning the competition with that one. I think we were joined first or joined second. I also remember my friend stabbing me in the back, quite literally. I have not forgotten that. We literally went everywhere. In 2015, everything was a little bit crazy. I probably had an event every single month, and when I say an event, it means 2 to 3 days of cosplaying and just going crazy with your friends and just having fun. I made, I think, about 20 cosplays just that one year, which is almost 2 cosplays a month. I don't mean that they were good cosplays, they were just fun to make. It was just fun to make something new to go to every event. We were literally just having fun. We even entered a parade, a Marvel parade with a bunch of cosplayers dressed all as Marvel, and it was just amazing. 2016 was probably the peak of my cosplay career. As I said, we had been going to all kinds of competitions all around the country, and we had been going to everywhere, but we were not really trying to make the best cosplays. We just wanted to enter the competitions, to see our friends, to have fun. We were never so much into trying to win the best cosplay nor anything like that. It was just for fun, and for me competition has always been just for fun. I think that in all those years, yes, I had won small competitions, and more than one small competitions. I had won second prizes, third prizes, honorable mentions, and in 2016 I just wanted to make something very big. And I really needed this year to be big, because things were about to change. This year I made cosplays like Yui Hongo, Astrid, or Hannah from Gate 7. That was a giant cosplay that I entered to a very big competition that I did not win, but it was supposed to be the best I could do. No, you are also not in the story just yet, Millie. It's just, they are just trying to go forwards. The thing is that this year, even if I did not win the biggest competition, I did win several competitions. This year, I won first prize on my local convention. I won a best in show in another convention, and we also managed to win a group competition with my friends, which we had been trying to win for 3 years. So it was definitely go big or go home kind of situation. But I said things were about to change. I definitely made the very best of this year. I made a total of 24 cosplays, which probably is the most I have ever done in a year. If you do the maths, that's 2 cosplays a month, which is quite insane. And we are talking some of these cosplays were very, very big and very complicated. Things were about to change because this was also the year in which I left Spain and I moved to the UK. 2017 was hard. I had literally left my family, my friends, my hobby, everything behind. Going from sunny and hot Spain to the cold and rainy England, you can imagine it was a bit of a shock. As I mentioned before, I did study English, but I think I forgot to mention that while I was studying in England, I met this wonderful boy, which was English, and there comes a time in which, after you've been together for many, many years, one of them has to move. And it just made more sense that I moved to England because, after all, I knew English. The job I had wasn't very stable over there, so it was something that it was way more easy for me to move here than it would have ever been for him to move to Spain, in which he would have melted like an ice cream in the middle of Murcia. I was very happy to move here, but at the same time it was very sad because I was leaving behind so many good things, so many good times, friends, family, everything. Everything was new, so I just decided to carry on doing the one thing I had been doing for many years that I loved, and this is cosplay. I had absolutely no money when I moved here, and of course I didn't have a job, I didn't have friends, I didn't have anything. In Spain I could have gone to any single city and I would have known someone there, but here I was starting from scratch. And even if you see me here talking to you right here, right now, as if we were friends, I'm actually a very shy person that just takes a long time to open up to people and just become friendly. Yeah. So it was pretty scary. It doesn't matter how clever or not, or how many degrees I had, or my working experience. The point is, I didn't have any work experience here in England, so finding a job was almost impossible for me. For many, many months, I was just giving CVs to everyone trying to find a job, and in the meantime, I decided to carry on doing the one thing that I always enjoyed doing, which was cosplay. But at the same time, I had no money. The little savings I had were starting to go down, so this year I made very simple cosplays with very cheap materials that I had brought from Spain, and I did my very best to also take pictures by myself because this time around, I didn't have any friends, nor I knew any photographers, nor I knew anyone that could help me, and I was spending the days at home just trying my best not to go crazy, to be honest. Actually, most of the money that I was making was thanks to commissions and thanks to my friends that were still in Spain, and they were asking me to make cosplays for them, and that was the only way I had to survive for a long time. I really, really thank you. At some point between 2017 and 2018, I started to talk with more people. Again, I carried on trying to make cosplays, and I eventually got a job as a supply teacher, just going to different schools around the city, just covering for teachers. And it was also very cultural shocking for me because the way that I taught my lessons in Spain was totally different to the way I had to teach them here, and they didn't really care about what I had studied. I had literally to teach all kinds of things to a bunch of kids that didn't want to learn, which was very, very interesting. My first ever job was washing dishes in a school, and they were sending me to all kinds of crazy places. I wasn't really feeling very fulfilled because I had studied to be a teacher, but I really didn't feel like I was given the chance to do a very good job, especially since I had to go to a very different place each time and teach a different subject from the ones I had studied. And yeah, it was awkward. I had started a Etsy shop, which I knew was a way of just getting some money doing crafts, which is something that I knew I was good at. Actually, the first ever thing that was in my shop was going to be little dolls, which I called cosplay dolls. And the idea was that I had so much leftover fabrics from my old cosplays that I wanted to make mini cosplays for these dolls to sell to people, so I would just like be able to use all the scraps from all those fabrics. That didn't go so well, and I barely had like a couple of sales ever in that shop. Another thing that happened at the time is that I realized I had so many cosplays and they were all crazy and all around the place that I decided to make a cosplay planner so I could just write down all my ideas and have a list of all the things that I had made and all the fabrics that I had in order to be able to easily make more cosplays and make them quicker. This was the beginning of what is now my cosplay shop. I must say, being a supply teacher meant that I was constantly on calls. There were days in which they will call me to go to a random school, and maybe there were weeks in which I would be just doing nothing, just waiting in my room for that call to tell me I had to go to a school in the middle of nowhere to just like teach these kids that didn't want me to be there. During this time, I did start meeting people here in the UK, especially photographers, doing networking events, and one of the cosplays that I made this year was my Wonder Woman. I did go to a couple of local conventions here in the UK, and I did win a couple of prizes as well, but definitely the competition and the cosplayers and the scene and everything was so different from Spain. I wasn't really finding the vibe nor my people, at least not yet. In 2019, I did try my best to go to conventions, but I was definitely not clicking with anyone here because most of the cosplayers I met were teenagers while I was an adult, and I just did things differently. I don't know how to explain it, but when you have been doing cosplay for a while and you already have like all this knowledge, you've gone through all these hoops and all these stages in which you have improved your craft, it's nice to talk with teenagers, but it's just a bit weird when you are a full adult with an income and trying to find a job, talking with a 15-year-old which is just having fun and going out with their friends and still going to high school. You can imagine that it was never going to be the case. Definitely, I was losing a little bit my love to go to convention because it wasn't the same. I was going to the conventions to spend time with my friends, and my friends weren't there anymore. I didn't know anyone. It was sad. While I was still trying to find my group of friends, 2020 arrived, and we all know what happened in 2020. I must say, I did have a group of friends, but my group of friends here in England is not into cosplay, so I was going to conventions and I was dressing up, but I was pretty much by myself, dressing up by myself, and it wasn't as much fun. Anyway, I remember Froppy being the last cosplay I wore to a convention before everything happened in the world. For many people, lockdown was a time to just embrace their hobbies and just like flourish and just perhaps like start a channel or do this, do that. And for a brief period of time, I remember through lockdown, I did things like Ruby, which I was very proud of. However, I was working as a supply teacher, which means I didn't really have a lockdown. I barely had 2 or 3 months of lockdown before I had to go back to schools with very unnerving situations. While everybody was at home trying to protect themselves and trying to protect the people they loved, I was not forced, but kind of forced to go to school to teach these kids that were obviously not following the regulations. I still had to go to school daily, which meant going in public transport daily, and remember, I was a supply teacher, which means I still had to go to different schools and I was with a different group of people every single day. And more or less, I stayed in the same bubbles, but it was also a very, very scary time for me. There was this time in this school, they told me I could not wear a mask because basically the children couldn't see my face, and if I was wearing a mask, they wouldn't be able to learn, so I wouldn't be able to teach the class unless I took it off. We are talking, this is in the middle of the pandemic when everybody was hiding in their houses and we are not allowed to go outside, not meet your family, no travel, and you could only be at the streets for 20 minutes at a time. And they were telling me I couldn't wear a mask in front of this bunch of kids. There was this other time in which the restrictions said that there were only supposed to be 3 people in a room at a time. You had to keep a 2-meter distance from everybody. But because I was a supply teacher and there were so many teachers that were off, when I went to the staff room, I literally was in a staff room, not much bigger than my bedroom, with 17 other people and an open window. At lunchtime, not one of them wearing the mask. My mental health, you can imagine, wasn't the best at that time. I did have several panic attacks during that time. I was so worried of getting someone in my house infected. It was very, very difficult. And this situation carried on for months. I was seeing whole groups of children being sent to school because they had been in contact with someone, and whenever I told, hey, I've been in contact with this group of children, should I go home? No, you're a supply teacher, you can stay. And it's like, I felt like, what if I was just transmitting this to everybody else? It was horrible. Well, it should have been a great time to just catch up with my cosplays and just be happy doing stuff. Instead, I was just nervous, constantly nervous, and just not having time to just do all the things that I wanted to do. I was in a constant state of alarm, and my initial joy when I managed to make this fairly complicated cosplay in 1 week turned into not being able to do much just the rest of the year. By 2021, I really, really hated my job. I was very unhappy and I really didn't think I would be able to stand it for much longer. Previously, as you know, I had opened my Etsy store, and not only I had put this cosplay planner that was working so well, I was getting sales all the time, but also I decided to make little patterns here and there just to help other cosplayers so they could make their own cosplays easily without having to do the hours of research that I personally had to do whenever I started a new cosplay. Throughout the years, it had slowly grown, and it was starting to be something decent. I have also said, as a supply teacher, I wasn't making a full-time job salary. I was just going to the places they told me to go, and there were weeks in which I didn't get paid. If it was a bank holiday, I didn't have a job that day. If it was Christmas, I didn't have any jobs that. If it was summer, I would have literally 2 months in which I wasn't paid a single penny, and Etsy and these patterns were the only way to kind of complement the money that I was making as a supply teacher and just get by through those months in which I had no work at all. I also had started Patreon this year, and again, I started my Patreon just as a way to just share all that extra content that I was creating. Completely forgot to mention, but I actually had opened a blog many years before where I shared tips and things and how to make patterns and how to make this or that cosplay, and blogging was not so popular anymore, so I thought to move a few of the things to Patreon because it was getting very complicated to just upload all the processes and all the work in progress pictures of my cosplays on the blog, so I decided to move all that content, which was very specific, to my Patreon, so people could actually access in a more intuitive way all that information about those cosplays that I was making. The pandemic was still pretty much a thing, and I was still going to these schools in which I wasn't feeling safe, still feeling unappreciated and underpaid for all the for all the work that I was doing. It was also around this year when I started my YouTube channel, and I decided to share some of my cosplays in a more interactive way. Up until now I had just been taking pictures of the process, but I thought making videos would be easier for people to understand how I created my cosplays, and it was at this time that I made my Yashiro Nene, and I show you how I made my Froppy cosplays. And also when I got my love for doing a little bit of cinematic scenes with my otaku, because there were no conventions, it was pretty much still the middle of the pandemic, so I thought if I can't go to a competition to just show my skate of this character that I love, I may as well record it and put it on YouTube so people can still see it. In 2021, as the new academic year started, things had become so weird, there had been so many changes, the schools I used to go to were changing, and I became so unhappy that I just decided to just quit my job. Keep in mind, at this time I was not monetized. I think there were 3 people on my Patreon, which were my friends and were there just to support me. I love you. And I was only making the bare minimum to buy food, but for me, that was enough. I talked with my partner, I told him the situation, he knew that I was so unhappy. During this time, my Etsy shop had been growing, and I didn't have so many things in the shop at the time. I don't think I had more than 10 patterns, probably just like 7, and they were selling and they were giving me enough to feed me, which for me it was enough. And I decided that if with no effort whatsoever I was able to make the bare minimum, what could happen if instead of being unhappy trying to go to these schools, I would just spend my time trying to make patterns so I could just put in the shop and just try to grow my business to become a full-time creator, and perhaps that way I could help other people to do this hobby that I love, and just basically to learn how to sew and how to do cosplay. And yeah, I talked with my partner and we agreed that I would give myself a period of time in which I would just like quit my job for a time. I would always be able to go back to it, but yeah, just try and see if I could manage to grow the shop enough to just have an income just by creating cosplay. The other reason why I wanted to quit my job is because I would have time to go and visit my family more often, because they lived all the way over in Spain, and due to the pandemic and circumstances, I had not been able to go and see them as often as I would have liked. I lost my mum in 2022. "2022 was both the worst and the best year ever. I think some of the most wonderful cosplays I've ever made, I made this year. I made Black Lobelia, I made Joe Forger, I made Ganju, Isabella, Peppa. I almost made Beto. Because yes, I was doing a lot of cosplays, I was so into it, I was sewing like crazy, I was creating like crazy, I was sharing on YouTube, I was sharing on Patreon, I was everywhere. And it was amazing, I was having fun, I was doing cosplays full time. It's like, I would have never imagined that could be a thing. And I was actually going up, my shop was going up, everything was going up. But I was also overworked. I was so overworked. Just imagine there was this month in which I promised I was gonna finish an Anya cosplay, make complete Beidou from scratch, and also make her sword from scratch, and all that I was going to be giving to my patrons for £5, and I was going to make everything in 1 month, and it just couldn't happen. So I was making cosplay fastest, but I was doing so much of it that I was working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, morning, evening, afternoon. I was working at all times, all day, every day, and it's not sustainable. It's not something that you can do, nor it is something that you should do. 2022 was great, but also eye-opening. I couldn't go at that speed, and I had to try and just slow down because I was not going to be able to make it. In this year, I made cosplays like Nezuko, which was amazing, but I also made crazy projects like making a katana in 2 weeks. I finished Yuzuku and I made Wednesday Addams and just tried to be a little bit on the loop with cosplays that people would like. And not only that, I decided to start this crazy project for Tifa, in which I was gonna be making the remake cosplay for Tifa with all the details from scratch, and I was going to be entering this cosplay competition with my friend to enter the classifications for World Cosplay Summit, which is probably the biggest convention in the world. I literally spent 3 months without resting, just trying to make the Tifa cosplays, and then when I went to Spain, I spent even more time pulling all nights with my friend trying to finish these cosplays for a competition. I actually had to pause everything else because we were making these very big cosplays that needed to be made by a certain date for the competition, so I had to pause Patreon, I had to pause my channel, I had to pause everything in order to make these enormous amount of work on these cosplays. And when we entered the competition after all this time, we lost. And trust me, I always go to competitions without wanting to win, and the winners totally deserved it. I think that the judges were completely right with their choices for the winners because they totally deserved it. I realized then that we had rushed this project while there were people just enjoying their time, just spending a whole year trying to make these cosplays for the competition, and I had just been like running around trying to finish things with impossible deadlines and just trying to do the most while running a business, running a Patreon, running a YouTube channel, running everything. It kind of all exploded, and it all exploded until we got to this year. During all this time, the shop had kept growing to the point I was almost reaching a minimum income, which was great, but something happened and I got a copyright strike. And you wouldn't believe it, but the copyright strike was for bullet journal. Yeah, it seems that word is copyrighted, and I had put that word somewhere on my cosplay planner just for people who were looking for some kind of journal planner, and I got a copyright from this company, and they took my listing down. Now, this was before summer, and basically you can imagine, first the panic of being given a notice of copyright infringement. And if you are familiar with Etsy, you will know that that's the most scary thing that can happen to you, because Etsy is the kind of platform that can close your shop without any warnings, and they literally took down my listing without any warnings until I got this letter from Bullet Journal saying that I had used a trademarked word and I couldn't do that. And when I appealed saying that I wasn't aware that bullet journal is a copyrighted word, they didn't care. And even if I had changed the name of my listing was down forever. And all the traffic and all the links that I had put, all the time and effort I had put into that item, that if you remember was the first ever item I had in my shop, had poof, disappeared, as if they had never existed. Most of my sales still came from that listing. And when they took it down, what happened was that my shop that had been constantly up year after year, month after dawn, for the first time, it went down. It went down 40%. I lost 40% of sales because someone had decided that my item needed to be taken down because I had used a word which I didn't even know was copyrighted. And by the way, if you ever visit my shop, you will realize that I never use any words from any companies, even if my cosplays are very much based on characters. I try my very best to call them something else to make sure I don't have any copyright problems, because patterns are useful garments that you wear. You can't copyright a pattern, but you can trademark a word. So that's the reason why sometimes the names of my patterns are so funny. So think about the situation. I am overworked, working weekends and nights and afternoons. I get this copyright infringement that makes my shop go down 40%. Then I enter this competition in Spain, having to pause all my other projects and having to pause my Patreon and ways of income, and having to pause my Patreon and my YouTube channel and everything for this competition that I lose. And that's how I entered 2024. Now, I know this is 15 years of cosplay, and you were all expecting, and it comes to the 15th year, and then everything was beautiful and wonderful, and I had the best year of my life, and 15 years, and the 15th year was the year in which I accomplished all I ever wanted as a cosplayer. It hasn't really gone that way. Don't get me wrong, I've had really cool things happening this year. I did take January off. I went on holidays for the first time in the last 5 or 6 years. I also had a plan this year to just make more videos on YouTube, and I definitely halfway through the year realized that it was going to be impossible. There have been a few stressful things going on in my life. I have also grown a little bit on social media and even here on YouTube. I'm slightly, just ever so slowly crawling up, which was never my intention. I don't pretend to be cosplay famous or anything, but if I want to sell and just live just creating patterns, being known is kind of helpful. And I have also managed to do a lot of home renovations in the last year or so in my house, because I haven't mentioned it, but when we moved to this house, this was a very, very old house which was in very bad condition, so we have had to literally redo every single room one by one, because it was a little bit of a mess when we first moved in, and we have been able to slowly just make this a livable space. I have also just crawled and taken more space to put my cosplays and my crafts in all the rooms, but yeah, that's a story for another time. And in general, I'm happy of how this year has gone, but definitely I have been feeling the burnout. This year I also managed to make a few personal projects which were great for me, not so great for numbers and views, but I enjoyed making, which is the point. another good thing is that my health is better because the last 2 or 3 years I've had a condition in my skin called rosacea, which made it to a point in which I didn't want to show my face on camera because my skin was constantly so bad and so red and so angry that it made me really not like myself whenever I looked in the mirror. And fortunately I have now managed to turn it. I think partially it was a lot of stress that I had been gathering through these years in which so many things have happened, definitely have overworked myself, and I had to step back this year to look after myself, look after my house, look after my cats, look after my partners, and that is okay. I'm happy that this year went slower, and in a sense that has helped me recover from all the side effects from being so into something to the point of not being healthy. I really wanted this year to be the one in which I grew on YouTube, in which I had lots of new videos to show you and lots of new cosplays to show you. But I realized rather early in the year that it was going to be very difficult with all the other things that I still had to accomplish and just make sure that we're working. Overall, I think 2024 has been a year of transition and just a year of healing and just finding the balance and finding the speed and the way I'm comfortable doing cosplays and doing patterns and just basically just doing everything, because as I have said a million times in this channel, it's just me doing everything. I'm the one making the cosplays, the one wearing the cosplays, the one making the patterns, the one doing the shop. If you have customer service, it's me, the editor, the photographer, everything. It's a lot of work, and as much as I would like to be just doing cosplays all day every day, it's not always possible, so I have definitely had to stay back a little bit and just like make sure I find my pace and I find a way in which I can do what I love doing the most in a way which is sustainable, that I can still bring to you. During these 15 years as a cosplayer, I've managed to finish a total of 199 cosplays, which is a lot, and I'm very proud of it. Cosplay number 200 is just there, ready to be finished, and there's gonna be a lot more because I'm very sorry, I'm staying and I'm just gonna be around hopefully for longer, just showing you how to make cosplays and how to create and just do crazy crafts. The year is not over, and certainly you still have a few things left from me to watch this year, but I am also itching to start 2015, but I am itching to start 2025 because, oh, trust me, I have so many projects and so many plans that you can't imagine. This year has been slow, but I am so looking forward to start my 16th year as a cosplayer with so many ideas, so many things that I want to show you. I definitely want to come back to being here every single week, or at least every other week if I can't make it. And I have so many things to share with you. I just can't wait for it to start. If you stayed till the end, if you are new, if you are an old viewer, if you've known me since I started or halfway through, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for your support through all these years. Thank you for being there, listening to my nonsense. And thank you for just being you. Thank you for loving this craft, which is cosplay, as much as I love it. I really hope you decide to stay and you get ready to watch my next videos and my next cosplays. And that's it. I just want to thank you. Thank you for being my supporter, even if it's just with a watch, with a like, with a comment, being my Patreon, just being my friend. Just thank you. And that's it. Just let me know if you have any questions or if you want to know anything about any of my cosplays. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be seeing you in the next adventure. Bye! Hey, cats. I was going to just show you now. You left me alone. Did I take that long? Cats.